Mr. Seymour Bernstein, Mr. Andrew Harvey. We give a golden thumb. And I'm sorry, here I go again, but Seymour was so profoundly moved. He said that this movie is played a few places. He said he's never heard it sound as beautiful as here at the Virginia Theater. And he said, at the end of it, it was as if Roger was speaking to him. So that's why. We have a casting of Roger's Thumb, and we give to our guest, and we will, first I want you to take it and accept it. Thank you. And we will hold it for you backstage, and we have one for you too, Andrew. Thumbs up, 2 thumbs up. And now we'll have a seat, and we're going to bring out Scott Foundas and Leonard Maltin. We'll have a discussion, and we're setting up backstage for the master class. And did we ever find Bora Lee? Yes. Okay, great. Thank you. Let's have a... Where should I sit? In the center. Yes. Over here. You sit.
It doesn't matter.
I'm going to give you the
Okay.
microphone.
All right.
You know what? Why don't you two? Yeah. Oh,
Critics on each end. Very good.
yes, I'd like to have you two on the phone. Okay.
Very good.
Wasn't that special?
You have the mic.
I have to tell you, because I told this to Mr. Bernstein when we said hello this morning.
Seymour.
All right. Happy to call you Seymour. Thank you. I had the pleasure of seeing this at the Telluride Film Festival last Labor Day weekend, and unlike Ebertfest, which is kind to its audience and only gives you a handful of films every day, and you can all get into this nice, beautiful theater, at Telluride there are always choices, 7 things going on at any one time, and it's wonderful too, in a different way. So you never know for sure what you're going to see, and one afternoon I said, well, I'll try this. And I saw a film, the best way I like to see a film, knowing nothing about it. I really did know nothing about this film going in, except that it had been made by Ethan Hawke, that it was his first documentary. It was about a man of music. That's all I knew.
Well, I didn't know it either because I had never seen it before.
So we saw it together in the Opera House, this 1913 Opera House in Telluride, which is the jewel box of a theater, small, intimate, and all of us in that audience, I think, had this sort of bonding experience, coming together, being brought together by the film and by you, and we just, there was like a crescendo of emotion that built to that beautiful summary of the last thing that you say. And when it was over, the instant it was over, you and Ethan were on stage, and we all just leapt to our feet, as you folks just did. How could you not? And when I think of all the Hollywood movies of dubious quality that call themselves inspiring in their advertising, this is inspiring. You are inspiring.
You are inspiring.
Thank you for, I didn't mean to run off about that, but I just had to share because it meant so much to me. Did you see it at Telluride too, Scott?
No, I actually caught up with it quite late when I was asked by David Schwartz from the Museum of the Moving Image in New York to come talk about the film at a film club that he has in Westchester County in New York, and I was delighted to see it because I felt in some ways I'm the target audience. I live a monastic existence in a one-room apartment on the Upper West Side, and I just write articles instead of music. But I thought it's a wonderful film about the creative process, and I think one of the things, and maybe Seymour, you can talk a little bit more about this, that I think is one of the most interesting ideas in the film and something that is rarely talked about, is this idea of craft and this idea that no matter how much talent you may have, you have to really work at things, whatever it is you do. If you're a musician or a painter or an architect or whatever, that this idea of the kind of divine inspiration channeling itself through you, which is what you get in most of these Hollywood movies about creative people, is something of a fallacy.
Then the question is, why should we work at it? What do we hope to achieve? Well, if one of the goals in being alive, being human, is to make contributions to others, the only way to do it is to fulfill yourself and learn to have a certain dignity about yourself. And I'm not ashamed to say, to get to love yourself. The only way you can get to love yourself is to accept challenges and meet them, no matter how difficult it is. And if you're playing the piano, or if you're acting, or if you're a student of religion, or you're a gardener, or you're a cook, doesn't matter. Whatever it is that is your passion represents the real essence of who you are. And it's through that I think we can develop ourselves and make us fit to make contributions to others.
Andrew, tell us a little.
Such a beautiful answer.
Andrew, tell us a little. You happen to know the story of how this film came about. Can you share that with us?
First of all, it's such a great honor to be here with somebody who has completely stolen my heart since the first time I met him. This film came out of 4 great friends' love for each other. And I think that's one of the reasons why this film is having such an universal impact. I have a great friend called Tony Zito, who has been for many years the pupil of Seymour. And Tony, for a long time, had been talking to me about Seymour, Seymour this, Seymour that, Seymour says, Seymour is. And eventually I said to Tony, enough, you have got to help me meet Seymour. So Tony went to the phone, invited Seymour to dinner that night in New York. The door opened, and this person came through the door with his velvet jacket carefully tailored, and something happened. I think you fall in friendship just as deeply and wildly as you fall in love. And I fell in love at first sight with him because I felt coming from him this bonfire of soft, lucid tenderness. And we had a magical evening. And Seymour changed my life because I'd been worrying about an aspect of Bach. I think Bach is the greatest composer, but I was worried that there wasn't more emotionalism in Bach, more understanding of tragedy and despair. And I said this to Seymour, and he said, "That's rubbish." sweetly but firmly, he said, Bach understands everything and represents everything.
The most
archetypally."
romantic of all the composers.
That's it.
He was romantic.
Romantic and archetypal. And then I had already met Ethan Hawke, because Ethan is a great friend of Tony's. And I love Ethan and admire Ethan. Ethan is such a Renaissance person with all of his gifts that you know. But what you might not know about him, not knowing personally, is that actually Ethan is a very authentic person, very humble, and very passionate in his search for truth. And I came up with the idea with Tony, what a wonderful thing it would be if we invited Ethan to meet Seymour. So we had a dinner party, just the 5 of us, with Tony's wife, and I was sitting here watching these 2 extraordinary men gazing into each other's eyes and obviously falling in love in the deepest way with each other. Ethan was completely captivated, like a mongoose before a diamond cobra. I'm always saying to Seymour, he should have something on his chest saying, "Beware, your heart will never be the same after meeting me." What happened then is that through the magic of that evening, Seymour decided to give a concert for close friends in his room. Ethan was there with his wife and his daughter, and I was there. And I don't have the words for what happened that evening. Seymour played like I've never heard anybody play, and I've been passionate about classical music all my life because my grandmother was a concert pianist. But he played with such tenderness and such majesty that the whole world seemed to stop. And we were all transported into another dimension. And at the end of that, I turned to Ethan and I said, "Ethan, you have got to make a documentary about this man so that the world can meet the person that we have met, so that the world can have the transmission of the heart that we've had." And Ethan said yes. And I went up to Seymour and I said, "Whether you like it or not, we are going to have it done, and the rest is history."
But you left out a very funny thing. When Tony called me up and invited me for dinner, you know I hate to go to dinners. I hate to sip cocktails and make small talk. I said, "Well, who's going to be there? You know, if it's more than one person, I don't go." So he said, "Ethan Hawke and Andrew Harvey." And I said, "And who are they?" I didn't even remember who Ethan Hawke was. And he's even more famous than you are in the papers. Of course. So I had to Google both of you. And then I found out who Ethan Hawke was first. Then I Googled you, and I saw you sitting at a desk, holding forth on a very important subject, and I said, "Oh my God, I'm going to be with these 2 men. This is an important night in my life." The other thing is that you didn't know what was going on in my head when you said, "Whether you like it or not, we're going to make a documentary." This is what went on in my head. Why in the world would anyone want to make a documentary on the likes of me? That's what I thought. I said, I know so many incredible musicians. They ought to do it for someone else who's much more important than I. But as time went on, I discovered that Ethan had read my book, With Your Own 2 Hands. And in it, it suggests that the musician and the person must become one and the same. And Ethan wasn't quite sure which identity was the real Ethan, the actor or the person who is the husband and the father to his children. He was conflicted. So it never occurred to him that the opposite obtains. For example, everybody knows that life influences everything that we do, whether we're an actor or a musician. But that acting and being a musician can influence our life, that's something that most people don't think about. So that struck him, and that became the thesis of this movie.
I think that Ethan found his teacher, and that what I was witnessing that evening was the meeting of disciple and teacher. You could put it in that way if you like. And I think that Ethan went on a very profound inner journey to make this film and has been deeply changed by his meeting with Seymour. And I think one of the things that I love most about this film is how selfless Ethan is in this film. Here is a great star who is pouring out his resources to create something in celebration of someone else. He gives the whole film to you because he loves you so. And I think that's the proof of the journey that Ethan has made with you and, of course, on his own. So never underestimate, Seymour, the enormous impact that you have just by being you on the people who love you and know you.
That's very touching. But you know what you said about Telluride. Can you picture what the whole staff was there, you know? Ryan, Ethan's wife, rented a 4-story mansion for all of us. We all had our own suites. It was unbelievable. I never saw a home like that. Well, you know what Telluride is like. It has one mansion after another.
I don't know what that Telluride is like.
Well, stick with me and I'll tell you. So there we were in this wonderful opera house. I was sitting next to Ethan. Ethan had a lot of trepidation about this documentary. After all, it's about a pianist, right? He wondered, well, what will the average person think of this movie? And of course, I knew that from the very beginning. I had a lot of doubts about this. And now we were about to witness whether or not it's going to go over for a general audience. Now picture, I'm sitting next to Ethan, right?
I'll be Ethan.
And the movie starts, and everybody here saw what was going on. I was practicing. This is another thing. During the shoots, you know, there was no script, no rehearsals. Nothing was ever done twice. It was all spontaneous. So one day in my studio, the cameras are all set up and the mics are all set up. And Ethan is standing in the corner of my studio if he could find a place where there wasn't a cable to stand on. And he says to me, "Now, Seymour, I want you to practice for the recital you're going to give for my theater group, and you have to talk out loud while you're practicing." Ethan, I never talk out loud when I practice. Well, don't you have a sort of soliloquy with yourself? Yes? Well, talk it out loud. So in the movie, we're in Telluride, and everybody saw the beginning, and I miss a leap, and I say, "I keep overshooting the runway," whereupon the entire audience burst into laughter. I grabbed Ethan's hand, and I said to him, "They're getting the movie." And the rest is history. They sure got the rest of that movie.
Seymour, can you talk a little bit more about actually preparing for that recital? I mean, you talk in the film about having quit public performing at the age of 50.
Well, look here. It was 37 years since I gave a public solo recital. You know that I never stop playing, of course. When I give master classes, I demonstrate. You'll see when I do this for the pupils here. But to give a solo recital is something quite different. So 37 years went by. And in planning the movie, Ethan asked me if I would do this. He said, you know, the members of my theater group don't know very much about music. So would you consider giving a short recital and talk about the music a little bit to them? Well, I grew white. And in what I'm about to tell you went through my mind in a flash. This is what went through my mind. What is he asking me to do this for? I bet I know. He's afraid that when this movie is finished, the audience is going to hold forth to the stupid old adage, those who can do, and those who cannot teach. And he was afraid he's going to spend too much time filming me teaching, and the audience is going to think, well, he's a has-been. So I thought about this, and I plucked up my courage, and I said, I'll do it. So the meeting was over, and I went home. What do you think I did? I went right to the piano, and I started to practice as though I would prepare for my New York debut. And I never stopped practicing until I entered that rotunda of Steinway. Now, here it comes. I took a taxi to Steinway, and you saw the windows by the piano, right? I looked through the windows and I saw these illustrious actors and actresses sitting there. The concert grand was bathed in a light. It looked like the sun had descended. There were microphones everywhere, cameras everywhere. I said to myself, I'm going to die. This is where my life ends. I've had a wonderful life. I'm not going to survive this. I walked into the hall, and the first thing that happened was Ethan came over, and he gave me a hug. Would you believe that a deathly calm came over me? I said to myself, there's no way I'm going to let this man down. Of course, you know, I know from experience that we perform the way we practice, and I was really ready. But you know, under such circumstances, it's being filmed for posterity. It's a movie. You can imagine how I felt. So I thought that's going to do me in. Well, as soon as Ethan hugged me, this calm came over me. And I didn't realize, I never had an experience like that before. Days later, I figured out why that happened. When you do something for someone else, it temporarily distracts you from your own vulnerability. And that's what happened. I played every note for Ethan.
So beautiful. So beautiful.
But
I'm curious. I think you're playing.
see,
He said, I'm furious. I thought you were playing for me.
see, but this is what you do, Seymour. You can articulate things that other people can't. You just explained what went through your mind at this crucial moment in your life and career and for this film. Not everybody would be able to do that, even having achieved what you achieved. And that's why the film plays so well. Plus, I think Ethan Hawke deserves great credit for, what's the word, not intruding in his own film. You know, he's
I
in it,
think-
he's part of it, we understand his journey too, but he stays in the background.
Don't you think he created a masterpiece?
It's a beautiful film. It's a beautiful film.
It's about me, right? But
Yeah.
I'm detached from it now. I've seen it so many times. The first time I saw it, the only thing that I noticed is that I looked like an old a man, bald man, fat. And Ethan, maybe you can take out that shot there. And then I got over that, and now I see the movie objectively, and it's very much a masterpiece.
It's a lovely film. You know what, we're on the clock, and we don't want to cheat you folks. If you have questions, we have our able attendants with microphones out there, I believe, and we have time to take just a handful of questions. So please make them good ones.
Yeah.
And they'll let us know when they have a... And if you don't have questions, obviously these gentlemen are quite capable of speaking more, but here we go.
Forever and ever. Yeah.
Hi, thank you so much for that film. I couldn't help but notice the similarities you had to Mr. Rogers in this movie. Just the real calm sort of, he also played piano, and I noticed that's the way that you express emotion and a way that you help people communicate. I don't know if you ever made that connection yourself, but I thought it was pretty neat.
I didn't hear what she said.
Could you say it again, darling? Excuse me, sir.
Oh, really? Oh,
Okay.
really?
Did you hear Scott?
We didn't really hear what you said. Could you say it again? I'm so sorry.
I was thinking about Fred Rogers this whole time when you were watching, when I was
Oh,
watching
Mr.
the movie.
Rogers.
Mr.
Sorry.
Rogers, who was calm. I call him the singing psychologist because he was always expressing, communicating feelings through his music. I remember watching a documentary when he sat down to play piano when he was angry. And there were a lot of different ways that you were helping people learn to communicate and get in touch with their feelings. And I didn't know if you ever made any connection with Fred Rogers yourself or thought about that.
Were you ever aware of the children's television show Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood?
I'm afraid I haven't seen it.
Well, it's... You, in
I'm
a
too
way,
busy practicing.
yes,
you
of
see.
course. In a way, you are kind of kindred spirits. And
Really?
He was a bit of a Pied Piper of sorts, I think, for a generation or two of children. A very gentle, soft-spoken man who explained a lot of things about life and about growing up and understanding things.
And had an
not
extravagant
unlike
sweater
what you're able to
collection.
do through music. Yeah.
Seymour is endlessly being compared nowadays to the Dalai Lama, which rather pleases him, I must say. And so we have to address him as Seymour Lama.
I think we have something up in the balcony.
Question in the balcony.
Thank you for the beautiful film. I have had a teacher like you. I was a pianist, and she's 80 and she's dying right now. I was struck by the student in the film who came to you, and before he'd been to you, he said, I never knew there was teaching like this. And I am now myself a teacher of young students, and clearly they've had no idea either. And I'm just curious, will you all be dead soon, or are there going to be some more left? Is it just our romanticization of the past that there's this beautiful world that's almost gone, or are we teaching enough, and have you taught enough, and will it continue yet another generation? Do you think about that? What's your sense?
Seymour, are any of your former pupils now teaching?
Yes.
Well, there's part of the answer then.
I did. Almost all of my pupils teach.
Well, that's great.
And there is a great lesson in teaching. And curiously, I never realized why it is that I have a passion for teaching until my pupils gave me a surprise 80th birthday at Steinway. You know, they wanted to invited me to dinners and said, no, I don't want to go to dinners. Well, we'll take you to the theater. No, I don't want to spend my birthday. 15 of us will play for you at Steinway. Yes. So then I made a little speech to my pupils spontaneously, and it was the first time that I enunciated out loud why I love to teach. I looked at all of my pupils and I said, I love to teach because I want to help you feel good about yourselves. And how do I help them feel good about themselves? They can play a certain passage. I become them, so to speak, and I help them figure out what the blockages are that keep them from fulfilling that passage. They don't feel the shape of this phrase. I help them to do that. They feel so good about themselves, but I get twice as much out of it. So this is at the basis of teaching. However, the teacher in Whiplash, that is a monster,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And you know there exist some monster teachers
Sure.
right now in New York.
Mm-hmm.
They don't care about helping their pupils feel good. They only want to augment their own egos.
Mm-hmm.
And they never compliment their pupils, because if you compliment your pupil, such teachers think that they're losing credibility.
Mm-hmm.
See? So they're not human. So this is what I try to pass on to my pupils and to the audience here,
Mm-hmm.
that we're not teaching pupils, we're teaching people.
Mm-hmm. And you're inspiring another generation of teachers, which is great too.
Certainly.
And so important. Do we have anyone else out there?
There's a gentleman in the back,
waving
very
wildly in the back.
eagerly anticipating the microphone, or maybe just shout it out and we'll repeat the question.
Yeah.
Oh,
Is someone?
Does he have a microphone?
No, he's way by the exit.
They're going to get a
door.
microphone to him. That's why they told me to speak, and then they'll give him the microphone. This is Chaz. Okay. I have a question for you.
Chaz
I
is
was
standing over
very,
there.
very interested in one of your former students who talked about all of the major opuses in B flat by Brahms and Beethoven and Bach and everyone. And so I went and I looked at that NASA website, and I saw that there indeed is this cluster of galaxies so far out in the cosmos, and it is one of the biggest clusters of galaxies. There are thousands and thousands of things. It's so far out, and right in the middle of them is this big black hole, and there is indeed these sounds and vibrations that are emanating from them, and scientists in Cambridge were able to extrapolate the sound, and it is B flat. Now I know that B flat in Beethoven's day was probably a little different, but it is the B flat that's closest to, I think, the middle C. And I was wondering, in your own compositions, have you found any kind of correlation between what you play and the emotionalism of your music and B flat?
No, it never occurred to me.
There's your answer.
And all musicians, especially when we compose, we're drawn to certain keys, and I associate certain keys with the emotional projection that I'm trying to encapsulate in my particular piece. But it never occurred to me that B flat is 64 octaves below middle C in the universe. That never occurred to me. I was struck to hear that from my pupil. But it is a little dubious to say that, because pitch has changed through the years. So in Schubert and Beethoven's time, B flat was not like our B flat at all. It was more like an A or an A flat. So they called it B flat, but the pitch was different. Now, why did pitch rise through the centuries? Because the higher the pitch, the more brilliant the sound. So when the New York Philharmonic tunes up, they don't tune up to 440. They tune up to 441, which makes the sound a little more brilliant.
Wow.
So this whole subject is very nebulous, and I don't know how else to answer your question, Chaz.
Now, did we get a mic to that eager fellow in the back?
Gentleman in the back.
All right,
Yeah.
please shout out your question.
I did. Well, that's a supreme compliment, and thank you so much. You know, no one, even the greatest scientists, cannot figure out exactly what the language of music is. It's so miraculous that a series of notational markings can engender an emotional response in us. So, just for the want of a better description, we have to say that music is a language of feeling. And because all people, all around the world, whatever their nationality, whatever their religious beliefs, whatever their color or creed, everybody knows what tenderness is. Everyone knows what passion is. Everyone knows what joy is. And music encapsulates that in a series of sounds that are put together. And what the performer has to do is similar to being a negative in a camera with nothing on it. And suddenly, these impressions come to you, and you're filled with emotional responses. But you can't just play on your emotions alone. So then you have to figure out what all the markings are on the printed page. The composers are trying their best to communicate their deepest feelings to you. So that's part of the craft. And that's not even enough. If you don't make a physical connection to what you're feeling and thinking, then nothing comes out of the instrument. So now you just picture this. You're synthesizing your emotional, intellectual, and physical worlds. And what do silly musicians do? They accomplish this at their instrument or through singing or through conducting, and they go into their social world and they leave that synthesis way behind. And so I suggest that you pay attention to that process as it's unfolding while you practice and perform, and direct that into every aspect of your personal life.
Well, you folks are now in for a special treat because you're going to get to see Seymour in action, as it were, doing what he does best, with a piano, with some students for a master class. But first, let's thank him and Andrew Harvey for being here as our guest today. And Scott Foundas, my colleague and friend.
Oh, lovely. You did a wonderful class. I need